Yo, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel here. I got you guys a quick and nice little video on some scouting tips for TvT. Most importantly, how to pick up on all that weird jazz. So I had a viewer kind enough to submit one of the replays for this effort. So shout out them. I won't say who it is, but some of you guys might know who it is. And so we have a standard TvT here, or what looks to be standard so far. Obviously, something weird is going to happen. We have two players going 16, 17 gas, which is the standard gas timing now. And we're about to have both players SV Scout, actually. So we have one SV Scout coming here and another SV Scout coming here. So obviously they're SV Scouting at two different times. That's not really that big of a deal. 17, 18, it's fine. It's really it's very minor detail, at least at this level. And so this worker comes in. We're going to pick up on our first weird thing. So naturally, if you're going 16, 17 gas, you'll have two depots before factory. In this case, this opponent, which you're about to see, went 16, 17, but they have a factory before the second depot. So what does that mean, right? Well, usually what it means is your opponent went gas first. Gas first means you have a faster factory, which means you delay the second depot. That used to be the meta, not the meta anymore. And here we see a factory, right? We see a factory, but it was a 16, 17 gas. We saw it was 16, 17 gas. So what does that mean? Well, it means that they didn't build a Reaper. They built a Marine, right? Which we see something building from the barracks here. And what we're going to see now is a Marine pop out. This is already the first step right here. 9 times out of 10, when somebody's opening Marine first in this matchup in Diamond to Masters, it's 100% some sort of like 1-base variation into a 2-base transition. So off the top of my head, a couple of good ones. 1-base tank drop, 1-base reactor Viking tank push, and the third one being battlecruiser rush. So these three are probably the most common ones at this level for Marine first openers. But this would be your first sign that something's off. So now, if you pick up on the fact that it was Marine first, maybe not so much the factory, but if you just see that it was Marine first, what do? Well, the first step here is actually going to be to send your Reaper straight across the map. In this case, our friend Gulp here won't be able to do it. He's going to just check down the ramp, and that's kind of it. But if he were to send the Reaper across the map, he would run into Haze Marines. And as you see more Marines building, you pick up on some other stuff. For example, here, there is no reactor on his barracks. What add-on does he build in the factory? So in this case, after confirming that it's Marine first, it would be 100% acceptable for you to send your first Reaper across the map and continue to scout. Because really the only thing we know is that they're playing different. But how different, you know what I mean? Some people will play really weird, and it'll look very weird, but then they just kind of like don't know what they're doing, so then it goes into a normal game, and you're kind of like, well, what the fuck was that point of that? So it's really important that you actually like commit on the scouting there and consistently scout. So in this case, what our opponent, or what our friend here, Hayes, is doing is going for starport. He's going for a proxy starport, right? And so here we have a bunker to defend. Obviously, this person is clearly overcompensating on the defense. So what are they doing, right? Clearly, there must be something weird. Unfortunately, for the Blue Terran, the scouting hasn't really been there, so we're not picking up on the obvious signs. Now, let's just assume for a second that the Blue Terran Gulp actually scouts, right? Let's assume that they've scouted, they confirm all the Marines, and they're still trying to figure out, is it a tank drop? Like, what's going on? Okay, so the very first thing and the most obvious one is going to be to try to yeet your Reaper into the main. Obviously, on this particular map, it is very hard. You have only one way to come in, and there's Marines there. So if that doesn't work, what do you do next? So the next thing you would do is then scan. It's 100% fine to scan at this time. I think scanning has a little bit of a bad reputation because it kind of gets drilled in your head that you have to macro optimally and you have to always meal. And you really don't want to scan, especially early on. But at these levels, it's such a minor setback if you were to scan instead of a muling that realistically speaking, it's not something that's going to change, make or break your game. So if you have to scan or you feel like you need to scan because you haven't been able to pick up on what's happening, it's 100% okay to do that here. And, obviously if you were to scan here or somehow the Reaper gets in, you would pick up that there's a starport. and there's no add-ons here, right? Another big thing that people do at this level when they're doing weird stuff like this is they tend to build their buildings off to the side. And you guys have probably seen that before. In this case, this person's not really doing that. The only thing he's doing that with his diffusion core. So when it comes to scanning, I highly recommend scanning where the command center is. And that scanning here, right on top of where the command center would be, actually allows you to see what's going on back here, which is a very commonplace for people to build their stuff. Now, after scanning, what do you do next? Let's say you scan, like I mentioned earlier, and there is no starport. There is a starport in the main. Okay, no starport in the main. Pretty obviously, it's going to be a proxy starport, right? We can infer that from the amount of gas you've mined, the lack of add-ons on these buildings. Nothing here has told us that they've been spending the gas minus the fusion core. So when it comes to scouting for proxies, the most obvious places are going to be on the sides of your main, closest to your main. This is true for Proxy Stargate. This is true for Proxy Starport. There's always going to be on the side of your main because it's the fastest way to get from here to your main, right? If you go from here to here, when you go to the natural, there's not that many workers, there's not as many important buildings, so there's not a whole lot you can do there, at least this early on. So if you have any suspicions that there's a proxy, something being proxied in regards to Starport or Stargate, then I would 100% send a SCV or a Marine or something and scout on this side here. And don't be afraid, if you don't find it in the most obvious place, keep looking because you're probably going to find it somewhere. And chances are this person is putting it in a weird place purposefully to make it harder for you to pick up on it. Now, beyond all that scouting, right? If we have to spend so much time scouting, we don't actually, what do we actually do with our build? Because we don't want to do the wrong thing and then kind of just die, right? Like, oh, clearly I missed a sign. Why didn't I change my build? Or why didn't I place it super safe? And truthfully, you actually don't need to do that. These builds, standard builds, are standard builds because they're very easily adaptable, even on the fly, to certain things. So, for example, you're already going to be building a Cyclone. You're already going to be building a Raven. If a BC flies in your main, well, you're just going to Matrix it and lock on with a Cyclone. And, as long as you move the Cyclone, it's not going to die, right? Unless they have Yamato. But at this point, this early on, they wouldn't. So I always suggest that people play as standard as possible and only adapt upon seeing certain information. So, for example, if I'm the Blue Terran here, after realizing that it's proxy BC or something's proxied, besides looking for the proxy, I'm going to keep all my units in my main, right? I don't want to spread apart my units because if I spread them out, something might get caught out and then, it might be enough to lose me the game. Like if I have a Cyclone in the corner patrolling and I lose that Cyclone, I kiss my chances goodbye of being able to kill the BC because I don't got anything. So you want to basically keep all your army together and you want to be, paying attention to your mini map. If you were thinking about maybe like, maybe I don't need to build a tank and I'll build a Cyclone instead of a Cyclone instead or something like that. Try to play as standard as possible, but also really conservative and very safe until you find information that leads you to adapting or changing the build. So, if I were to find this proxy starport, I would just keep my Cyclone in here, and I would keep building Cyclones, go for Raven, all that stuff. So, again, as you can imagine, Banshee, Cyclones, this is already not, the best starts. Then we have the Blue Terran who's just going to go ahead and, like, randomly go across the map. To get some, not randomly because they're trying to get map control and map vision, and clearly they have a pressure build, but now it's gonna get really complicated and really tricky when that BC comes in, which is something that these people bet on a lot, heavily on actually. So really, it's one of the worst things you could do, assuming that it is a BC and not something else. So again, like I mentioned earlier, you just want to make sure everything is close together, but. Play as standard as possible still, and then, like I said, only adapt unless you actually see something. So, at this point in the game, it gets really weird and whatever. That's not really important. Obviously, you can see it's not very long, but the key things to take from this is just scouting and the process of elimination. So, beyond the three important or the three most popular one-base builds that I listed, you're always going to get stuff besides those top three things. And the best thing you could do against all those variations is to just consistently scout. And in TvT, you have the advantage of compare and contrast. So if I have a factory, my opponent should have a factory. If my opponent doesn't have a factory, what the fuck are they doing? Or if they have a factory, but it's later or it's earlier than mine, what's different? And you don't need to find the answers right away. It already helps you when you already realize something's off. Because as long as you realize something's off, you're going to be actively looking for, why is it off or what's next, right? If you look at it and you just brush it off, it looks the same, right? You don't really think about it. Then you're never gonna actually be paying attention for the other clues if there are any clues, and then you're gonna kind of get griefed on by like some random BC in your main or something like that. So, um, that's it for this video. I know it's a bit basic for some people, but I think it's like something that a lot of Terrans are struggling with who want to play standard in TvT, but they're getting kind of memed on by these weirdo, one base players or mech players. So, like I said, it's not gonna teach you how to hold it per se. I know, but you'll actually be able to look for it and piece the information together. So, if you guys have any questions, obviously comment them in the chat. In the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.